Hello, welcome to my portfolio video. I mean, I'll say this right off the bat, this is not like a how to get in or anything like that. This is purely just a bit like, oh, what's in this person's portfolio, and that's it. Because as you'll learn as I tell you a little bit about the history of me, because it's important to kind of know the context, I'm not the best person to take advice from, and I don't have a ton of advice. Yeah, like I maybe have like 2 or 3, you know, pieces of advice, and that's kind of it. And some of them are kind of specific, so it's not really for everyone sort of deal. But anyway, I've watched a fair amount of portfolio videos. A lot of them RISD, I'm not sure, but a lot of them just in general American. Like, there's not very many that I've seen, but then again, I haven't really gone searching for them. I've seen a few for London, and I think I saw one where a person applied to sculpture, I think. But yeah, like, a lot of them were based off of like the American system, so it's not quite the same as, you know, the British system. I think that in particular over here I feel like there's more emphasis on sketchbooks. I know that, is it CalArts, they do their portfolios, like you do a sketchbook and that's like it, and then others are like you submit singular pieces or something. I don't know. I've watched a fair amount, but a lot of them are not that particularly helpful because they're so related to each person and their own art that it's hard to kind of be like, oh yeah, this is how you do it sort of deal. That's why right at the front of this I'm being like, this is not how to get in here. But I kind of thought it might be interesting for people to just see what a portfolio would look like. But then again, if you go onto half these websites, they will have portfolios, or at least the open days they did, Djcad specifically did show a PDF that was like filled with them, but on the actual site it only has like a few pieces for the examples, but I don't know. I'll say this as well, I have heard that people did get their portfolios picked as examples for next year, maybe? They get asked if it could be shown as an example. Mine did not, so maybe that kind of tells you that mine's not necessarily the top tier, if you know what I mean. But anyway, I need to, well, I feel like it's just easier if I kind of explain a little bit about the Scottish education system, because it's different from, I believe, English and possibly Welsh and Irish, I don't know. But like the titles are different and stuff like that, and I think it would just be a bit easier to kind of explain everything if I just kind of go through like what it is and what's the equivalent of what. And when I say the equivalent of, it's weird because like I feel like on a piece of paper it'd be viewed as the same, but like when I went to the universities for the open days, let's say, first time I went and I mentioned I was doing HND, not gonna lie, I love the sense that I got from a lot of people that I talked to. It was kind of like, oh, so first year then, or maybe second year then. Like, it was, I don't know, that's the vibe I got. To explain how it works, I'm just going to do the latter half because that's what you kind of need to know for when I explain what happened with me. So in S5, I've got notes. It's like, excuse me if I look down to the left a lot. I have my computer open with my laptop, and it has everything kind of written down, so I have it in my head and I can say it a lot quicker because I don't really have a lot of time to film this video, so I should get move on. But anyway, in S5, what you do is like your second final year of school, and you're about 16, I think, when you do it. I don't know what it compares to, but in S5 you do what's called higher, and then that is the equivalent of NC, which you can do at college. And then there in S6 you can do, when you're about 17 again, you can do advanced higher. Like, some people get allowed to do like crash advanced hires, which I find weird, but you know, you could do that if you've done the higher, and that is the equivalent of HNC, but they usually say it's the equivalent of first year of university. That's what they say. At least I remember people telling me that when I got into it for a little while. And then you have HND, which you can do at college, which is second year equivalent of university sort of deal. I feel like in my circumstance, because I did just art and design, I didn't do like specifically animation and stuff like that, that might have changed things a little bit, mainly because I feel like with a lot of other sort of disciplines, if it was good, like biology and you want to do biology at university, I feel like you could do a HND and get into third year, like that, because that's the way it's supposed to be done. But like, I don't know, for art, maybe it was just because I did art and design, I don't know. But like, also as a side note, you can do, I think you can go to college when you're 16. So arguably, when you're supposed to be like an S5, you could be doing the HNC/HND. Like, you could do that. For college, specifically, HND is advertised as a 2-year course, and it is. But HNC is the first year, and then HND is the second year. You only get HNC if you leave, but otherwise you just, like, in your application for like UCAS or whatever, you just put HND and then you just put all your little units and courses and stuff like that. That's where you do that for that. Also, when it comes to college, it is very different from school. You have a lot more time to do stuff, like, because it is like considered more full-time education, even though it is like usually 2 days and a half days usually like what you do. Usually they have a lot more equipment and a lot more stuff and a lot more disciplines that you can learn and all that jazz. So like, it is very different. And NC, National Certificate, that's what it's called, is advertised a portfolio building course, and I would definitely say it's more that than the equivalent of higher. Like, that's just, I think, the way they level that out in the education system. But I would definitely say it is more of if you were thinking like, oh, I'm just going to do the same thing again, you probably are not. You're probably going to be able to do a lot more, which is why I would definitely say, like, you know, college is different despite the equivalent of ordeal. Okay, so now applying. So applying in the UK is done through UCAS. At least I think it is. I believe for when I applied to college, I had to just like send in a letter. But I think you can apply to colleges through UCAS depending on the college. But for university, it's done through UCAS. And for that, you have to do a personal statement, which I can't remember exactly how long it is, like 3,800 characters or something like that. I can't remember. And this personal statement is basically just talking about you as a student. But I found when I did my most recent application, which I got in, I was definitely mentioning like a way more artists and kind of like talking about my inspiration and all that jazz. More necessarily than I was talking about like, oh, I'm a good student and I've done this and that, and you know. And I feel like maybe that's just because it's like an art course and it's like more of what you're supposed to do than necessarily like just talk about you as a student, I think. Because I definitely think it helped my application a lot. You also have to get a reference from like a teacher. Usually if you're doing art, it'll be like your art teacher or whatever. But like if you're doing something else, like I think it can also be like your guidance teacher sort of deal. So those are like the 2 things you need to like get, other than obviously your general information, like the grades that you got or what courses you're doing. But other than that, in terms of like choosing universities, you get 5 choices. You can apply to the same university, but it has to be like either a different course or a different starting year. I didn't really do that for a lot of it, and I'll explain what I did like how later on. But you know, you get 5 choices total. I believe in like America you get 10 or something. So like it is quite different in terms of what you could do, but I suppose there's less universities arguably. And also in the Scottish system, because the way we have our tuition paid, we get 5 years paid for, but if you go to college and do HNC, HND, then those 2 years get taken off of your tuition. So basically I have 3 years left for tuition, which is why I definitely wanted to go to Scottish University, because I'd rather get that paid for. And also I have to pay for 1 year, but it's not as much as what I have seen both overseas and both like just further down the country. Like, but specifically applying to art school, there's kind of 3 options you kind of get after you've kind of submitted your application. Usually they don't knock anyone out after that stage. Usually they will ask for either a digital portfolio. Djcad used to do it where they only asked for the hand-in, where you had like a 10 kilogram limit, and then some have a digital portfolio and a interview stage. I believe specifically Djcad, they only have an interview stage for certain people. Like, they have it for, I think, people who are out with the UK, I think. And they only really do it otherwise, I think, if they're like really not sure or they're on the fence, as I've heard, because I feel like from what I've heard, it's very, very rare to get an interview from them if you're not like going for like, I think either second year or if you're going from overseas or deal, I think. So in terms of, for me, what you need to know is Djcad, for the first 2 times I applied, only had the hand-in. They didn't have a digital portfolio until the 3rd time I applied, which was also 2020 when so it was good that they added it that year. There's also Edinburgh College of Art, which have a digital portfolio and then an interview as far as I'm aware, but I only got as far as the digital portfolio. Now for what I did. Which gets a bit complicated, and it's going to go over for the past like 6 years or so, maybe more. So just bear with me because there's a good few bits, and I've simplified it a lot, and I'll try and just get through it, just because I feel like it's important for the context, because again, it's like I did go to college, I did do H&C, and then I'm going into 1st year, so some people might find that confusing. So let's get into it. So NS5, which was like late 2013, early 2014, I did higher. I actually got into advanced higher for S6, but I got a D in my higher, so I had to drop back down. Now, I find this kind of weird, mainly just because, like, usually if you get anything below, like, or they expect you to get a C or lower, they'd usually talk to you and be like, are you sure you don't want to drop down? So it became quite a surprise that I got, like, a D. So at the end of 2014, I applied to NC at NESCOL and I got in. I believe, actually, I had the interview for that, like, at the beginning of 2015, and I also got a B in my higher for art that time. I do remember, actually, just as a side note, there was one point where the teacher was explaining how to do the writing part when you talk about paintings and stuff, and there was one bit at the end where you kind of link it back again, and I wasn't doing that, so it's entirely possible that's also where I was losing marks previously, because I just remember being like, oh, you do that? Like, wait a minute, I'm not going to do that. So, you know. So in 2016, because I did the NC from 2015 to 2016, I decided to go on to do HNC, HND, and so in 2017, very early 2017, I realised I wanted to go to university, and this was when I was at the latter half of my HNC year. I wasn't entirely sure, like, of where I wanted to go, and I only really realised when my lecturer decided to do a last call for references, and he said he wasn't going to do anyone's reference if they didn't speak up now, and I was kind of like, from what I've heard about the UCAS stuff, people, particularly in S6, like, fretting about and all that jazz, and I was like, you know what, I think I'd rather just do my research for the year and then know exactly, like, what I'm going to do for the next year and coming out of college, hopefully, if I can, which I did. So originally I looked around for open days at the beginning of 2017, but there wasn't really any. They always tend to be in the early part of the university year. So there was the degree shows in like June time, and I went to the Djcad one and I absolutely loved it. And I was going to go to the other ones, but I just decided, you know, I'll wait until the open days because then I can actually see the university and all the courses and all that jazz. Also, as part of HNC, HND, each year you do a graded unit, and I got B in my graded unit that year, which I was pretty proud of. So I was kind of hoping that would be quite, I kind of felt a bit more sure in terms of like that I wanted to do as our deal for like university. So at the end of 2017, I went to each open day for each of the 4 art schools. I'll talk a little bit about the 4 different ones, like, at the end, and I can talk about, like, why I didn't want to go to which ones and all that jazz, after I've done this whole, like, timeline of events. So I decided to apply for General Foundation in Djcad, which is in Dundee, and I decided to apply for illustration first year for Edinburgh College of Art. So I got an A in my graded unit that year, so I was pretty proud of it, and I think that was after I found out after I'd been rejected from both Djcad and Edinburgh College of Art. I didn't get past the digital portfolio stage of Edinburgh College of Art, and looking, kind of remembering back to that portfolio, I really didn't know what I was doing, and I definitely probably should have asked one of my teachers for help and all that jazz, but like at that point in time I think I was just so busy with other things that I didn't really think about it that much, or even I don't know. Just, I feel like I should have done that, but I didn't. And at this point in 2018, Djcad only had the hand-in with the 10 kilogram limit, so I didn't get past that point. Because it was either a decision's made there, or maybe you get an interview. Maybe. Sort of deal. But yeah, and then after that I went to the Djcad degree show, and I decided that I just wanted to just apply for Djcad, and again I'll talk about why after I do this timeline. So 2018, 2019 I applied to Djcad again. I didn't get in. I went to the degree show. That's pretty much what happened that year. And I applied again for General Foundation for 2020 entry specifically, so 2019 and 2019, beginning of 2020. And I went to the open day that year, and they introduced the digital portfolio, which they previously had not done. And the plan was originally that they were going to do the digital portfolio and then the hand-in after that, but obviously because of the pandemic starting, they decided just to leave it and just go off of the digital portfolio. Also at the end of 2019 I went to a life drawing classes. So I went to a life drawing class and got a bunch of life drawing done, so that's also what I did that year. So in 2020 I looked at the Djcad degree showcase they had this year, which was online. I enjoyed that too. I always enjoy the degree shows and stuff. I always go to it, and I need to go to this year's one actually, because that just went up a week ago. I'll need to look at that. So I decided again I was going to apply for Djcad, and I decided that I would apply for a course called Portfolio Oeuvre. This was basically a course to help build a portfolio and help with the application process and all that jazz as well. So once I contacted Julie, we talked and we decided that we were going to do the 20-week course. So in the end of 2020, kind of beginning of 2021, I was doing the 20-week course for that. And that's where a good chunk of my portfolio comes from, almost all of it. And I applied for Djcad General Foundation. I didn't apply for anything else, as I had in the past 3 years. And I got in this year, which I'm super fucking excited about. So that's kind of the general timeline, very, very quickly, just to kind of show you. So I tried 4 times to get into Djcad, and I got in on the 4th try. And I only applied on my first year to a different art school. So I'm going to go through the art schools real quick, because there's only 4, and I'll just say why I didn't go to them so you can get a better understanding from my perspective. Because I'll be one of the first people to tell you to don't discard your options. I'm kind of a do as I say, not as I do sort of person, and I mean, if those 3 attempts have not told you, that might be a good idea. Or maybe not. But then again, I only have 4 pieces of advice, so well, actually 3. Okay, so in Scotland, as far as I'm aware, I might be wrong on this, I don't even know, there are 4 art schools. There is Djcad, which is Duncan of Jordanstone School of Art and Design. Is it School of Art and Design? No. I think I'm taking that from Glasgow. Duncan of Jordanstone College of Art and Design, that's the one. I should know that, I'm going there. But as far as I'm aware, everyone calls it Djcad, because it's way, way easier to say. And that's down in Dundee. There's ECA, which is Edinburgh College of Art in Edinburgh, obviously, as the name says. There is the School of Design, because there were 2 buildings, if I remember correctly, and one was the College of Art, one was School of Design. I don't entirely know if they're completely different entities or if they're just all under the umbrella of College of Art, but Edinburgh College of Art is what I applied to. So there is Gray's, which is in Aberdeen. I think it's Gray's School of Art, I think, maybe, I don't know, but it's in Aberdeen. And there is Glasgow School of Art, which is in Glasgow. I didn't want to go to Gray's, mainly because I didn't really want to stay in Aberdeen, and I wanted to stay wherever the university was. And I didn't really like the vibe there, which is obviously hard to come across, because there are going to be people who absolutely really want to go and have no idea what I'm talking about when I say I didn't like the vibe there. But just for me, I don't think it was a good match, really, and I don't know, I just think, nah, it just wasn't for me. When I went to the degree show for Glasgow, they didn't really have a course that I wanted to do. I'm not gonna lie, when I went there and we were looking at all the different things, I remember me and my friend just being where's this course? What about this course? Do they not have a course in that? And I don't know whether it's a case of, for that, like, open day, we were in the wrong place, because we were at the movie theater a bit, where they were doing, like, different lectures. But I don't know whether there was another area, like, up the road, like, in the building opposite the Rennie Mackintosh. Like, if there was places in there or something? I don't really know, like, but there didn't seem to be a course that I really wanted to do, and I didn't really want to live in Glasgow. So it's kind of one of those things where it was just a bit like, nah. So with Edinburgh College of Art, I did apply to illustration. The reason why I stopped applying was because I knew at the end of the day I was always going to want to go to Djcad. I mean, even in my head I was like, if I get into Edinburgh, I'm just going to apply next year for Djcad. Like, for either whether it be like I go there for the first year and then try and get into second year, whatever it may be, I knew I was always going to try and apply there. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, I don't know, it just was not worth it for me. Plus I didn't necessarily really want to live there. I think I was mainly going because like siblings are there, and I was like alright with it, but again, my heart was set on Djcad. So the reason I chose Djcad and like only applied to Djcad. I have a lot more history with Djcad. I'm kind of going back into the history of me. But I have been to a thing called DCon there, which is a convention that is run by the 4th year animation students, but I think it might have changed to the 3rd year animation students. I think. Because I remember seeing something where it like changed to the 3rd years, and then they were also like incredibly, how do I put this? Just seemed incredibly like just surprised and unorganized that they were doing it. So I don't know whether it was sprung on them or not, because usually it's the 4th years that do it, but I think they said it was the 3rd years doing it now. Or at least for 2020 before it was stopped. So this convention is done to raise funds for the degree show. And it's also held at the Student Union, which is on the Dundee University campus, which is also where Djcad is. It's literally like around the corner from Djcad. Or even behind it / beside it, I don't know. I can't remember if it's like right there or not, but I think it is actually. I think it is. But it's usually run like on the campus, with main building being the Union, which is where the after party is also held, and then it's also like other buildings around it, but also Bonner Hall. In 2018 they added that one, or 2019, not 2018. And I absolutely adore DCon. I've been there every year since 2015, including the second one that happened in 2017. But anyway, in terms of this, through DCon I've met like a lot of Djcad students and also just University of Dundee students, and like every single one of them is lovely, and like a lot of them, like I was genuinely like, if I were to go to university, I feel like that I would get on with like almost everyone there. Like, I feel like they're just my kind of people, if that makes sense. Like, comparatively to say like Grays or like Glasgow, like I didn't really feel like I vibed with them, but it's like I 100% like Djcad is where I wanted to be, and partially was because I'd met students at like DCon, and you know, it was a bit more of a relaxed environment than an open day where they're kind of like, we're kind of being paid, we need to be a bit more professional sort of deal to do an open day. But like I feel like they could be a little bit more relaxed, and you know, obviously with the after party there's a couple, and then it's fun, it's so good. And on top of that, I've also stayed in Dundee a bunch of times for DCon, and I've also always loved shit at the degree show, and just in general, like I have a lot more history with it, and maybe that has affected my view, but I did go to the open days and I did do research online and stuff like that, which comes on to my next point where I say, use up all your choices if you can. The only reason I was being stubborn was because I knew that even if I applied and got into every other university each year, I was always going to say no. I was always going to say no. Like, I felt like I was always just going to be like, no, I want to go here. And I think that stubbornness, to do that, you need the persistence of me. You need quite a lot. And I think, you know, it is something where, at the end of the day, like, I did it because I knew that that's what I wanted. And I wasn't going to compromise. And I think for a lot of other people, like, they would be willing to, they just want to go to university, and that's fine if you want to do that. And I would definitely recommend to use up all your choices. I would not say oh, don't use up that choice, don't use up, like, use up as much as you can, if not all of them. And you might as well try, if you're just applying for first year for all of them, maybe apply for second year for another one if you want to. Like, at the end of the day, it's really up to you. And I think that, you know, I only did it because I know that I was going to be persistent and stubborn enough to get in one day, and I did. It's self-fulfilling prophecy right there. Like, see it so many times, and it's always for, like, bad things. Also, for doing that, I just felt like, you know, obviously organizing a portfolio, making sure it matched whatever I was applying to. For example, if I was applying to illustration or something else, like, making sure it applied for each course properly. But yeah, I just decided it wasn't worth the effort for me to do it, so I just didn't do it. Advice time. Okay, so really quickly before I go into the actual portfolio, I know I've done so much. So much of this video is just not the portfolio, but I'm gonna get there. Real soon. I'm just gonna do the advice bit first. So I don't have a lot of advice. I have very, very few advice, and a lot of them will not apply to everyone, unfortunately. But I do think that these pieces of advice are actually genuinely useful, and not just very tailored to a person's ordeal, and there aren't. I would say college is really good. It's really, really good. However, I would recommend that if you do get into your college of choice and you really, really want to go there, but you want to maybe go to college first, I would suggest going to the university. Because at the end of the day, you are not guaranteed a place. Like, that's one of the biggest things, is like, you're not guaranteed a place. Even if you get in 3 years and then you finish your course on the 4th year, or I'm just applying it to me now. Even if you're going for like HNC, HND in something, you know, and you do, you know, first year, you know, you apply, you get in that first year from school, and then you go to college, you apply just to see if you'll get in, you know, you get in again. There's no guarantee you're going to get in that 3rd time. There's also no guarantee you're going to get in that 2nd time. So it's also maybe just me speaking from someone who, like, didn't get in. Like, and speaking from someone who, like, has tried for years to get into a university that they really wanted. It is just, it's more of like a be wary. Like, at the end of the day, really think about it, because there's no guarantee that you're going to get in, and you might spend the same amount of years just even outside of college to get in. Because I do know people from college who have applied each year and then to a college that they really wanted to get into, the same college I'm going to now actually, but they didn't get into it at the end of the year, and then they just went off to a different college, and you know, they weren't necessarily massively happy about it, but they were kind of like, alright, well, I guess I'm going here. Which, I don't know, for me, I ain't selling for less, apparently. I might be being a bit from experience for that advice, but like, it is one of those things where it's like, I would recommend that you make sure you look around and make sure you really decide on what you want to do, because at the end of the day, I feel like it just entirely depends on you. But I recommend you just go to the university rather than just hope and pray that you're gonna get in the next time. And you might, but like, again, it's not a guarantee. So in terms of just in general advice, like, I would definitely say, from what I learned from this year in this application, definitely talking about artists and how they inspired you, and artists that don't necessarily have to be like massive artists. Like, they could be artists that you know, like either in your hometown, I suppose, or just people that you know online as well. I think it's always a good idea to like talk about how they inspired you, and maybe show pieces that are specifically inspired by an artist or of a piece. You'll see that in some of the work that I've done in my portfolio, but like, as I mentioned before with the personal statement, like, there was a lot more mentioning of artists and talking about artists and inspiration and all that jazz, so I would definitely say it's always a good idea to do that, even if it's, you know, in your actual portfolio, like you'll see in mine. One thing that I did kind of learn, and I did implement in this portfolio from a portfolio video, I believe. Someone had gone to American school. I can't remember which one. I don't know if it was Justhea. I don't think it was Justhea they actually went to. I think it might have been like Pratt or something. Or a different one, I don't know. Parsons maybe? I'm not sure. So if you're looking to add, like, say, a digital piece and you don't really know, or even doesn't have to be a digital piece, but you don't really know how to kind of add a piece or an idea, I would definitely say this if you're looking to do illustration or animation or whatever, or maybe you just want to show that you can do digital stuff, which, I don't know, it's up to you. The best way I feel to go about it is to maybe pick an artist, a digital artist or a non-digital artist, doesn't have to be, but like, you know, it's a good idea to kind of put them in together if you want to, and link that artist to that piece and make a original, I don't know, the word original is a bit weird, but make a piece up yourself and create a story and make a little story within the piece to then kind of also show, because then it also shows, like, you know, not just necessarily technical skill with digital art, but like also just like you're thinking about stories and stuff like that, particularly if you're going for something like animation or illustration or whatever. And you'll see it in my portfolio, but like think about like what you're trying to say with a piece and what is the character doing, like who are they interacting with. It doesn't have to be a big thing. Like for me, I just looked at it like a little scene in a movie, like if it's like a panning shot or whatever, or if it's like a, you know, what is the shot trying to tell, or like a, what's it called when it's like a shot that's like introducing stuff and it's just like showing like a pan of like a happy town or whatever. I can't remember what it was, but like at the end of the day, like, you know, just thinking about like a story and applying that and how you tell it in the piece, sort of. That's what I did. So, okay, so just as a general sort of thing, before we go dive right into the portfolio, which I'm gonna have to film on a different bit because I'm running out of time just now to do it, so it might change a wee bit. I might be wearing something different, I don't know, I might just chuck on the same jumper again. For Djcad, for the digital portfolio, because they decided for 2021 entry that they would just do a digital portfolio because obviously everything going on and they didn't really know how it was going to shape up to the point, particularly like in April, if it'd be good or not to have a digital portfolio, which they decided not to do, or have a physical hand in even. So they decided to go for the digital portfolio like they did last year, but this time they were actually going to be like upfront about it and be like, yeah, we're just going to choose from this sort of deal. So for the digital portfolio, you had 15 slides and you were encouraged to put more than one photo on a slide, but you could if you wanted to. You could also have an extra page for contents, but you know, it wasn't a case of like, oh, then you'd have 15 slides or 16 slides to play about with. It's like, no, it was still the 15 slides, like, so you could have a contents page just saying what was in it and that was about it. Like, you couldn't really do anything else with it. So I mean, it's up to you whether you want to have one or not. I don't think you necessarily have to. We ended up putting one in though. For full transparency, with Portfolio Inf, we had our work looked at, like, and when it came towards the end of the course, Julie would look through all the pieces and start selecting work and kind of putting it together, and you know, then we would send in, well, at least for me, I send in a lot of sort of extra work, sort of like the couple of pieces and projects I did previously, and even the life drawing that I did in 2019 as well. And we kind of both went back and forth and kind of put the portfolio fully together. And I'll talk about each piece and like around about what, possibly, yeah, we'll have it on it, around about when I did it, like as we go through. But yeah, as I said before, I'm not going to be able to do the actual digital portfolio right now, so it's going to be a different clip to actually go through the portfolio. Presumably it'll still be the same background, I'll just get this a little easier. But yeah, I think for advice and stuff like that, that's pretty much all I have. I don't really have anything else. And before we jump into the portfolio, I just want to also say again that this is not like a do these things and you'll get in sort of deal. Like, this is just if you're nosy and want to know what was in my portfolio. Yeah, and I have an extra video of content out of it, which is going to be super long considering how long I've been recording, but yeah. Anyway, so here's the portfolio. Okay, so it's the next day, and the lighting might be a little bit different because it's worse. I need to get like a ring light thing. I actually ordered one, and I need to check up on that because the order got cancelled on AliExpress, so I'm like, I'll need to check that. But anyway, I think I mentioned everything in like the previous video. I might come back and say stuff again. I can't exactly remember everything I said. So basically into the portfolio I go, I suppose. There was one piece that I did do that I would have liked in my portfolio because I really liked it, but I don't know if I'm not sure if it would have actually helped my portfolio necessarily, like looking at it now sort of deal. But that one will definitely be on my Instagram. I have like a lot of different social medias, all under Mochi Jackalope. So if you want to go follow those, that'd be great. So for my portfolio, I already said like what you needed, or what you were allowed in your portfolio for Djcad specifically. We decided to do a contents page. Now, my portfolio has a mix of portrait and landscape stuff. If I remember correctly, the program was called Freehand, but apparently it's an old program that Julie from Portfolio had, so it's kind of a bit, I don't know whether you could get that and do that. You might be able to still with like Word. I'm not sure. There might be a way of finessing it. I know that there's like, I think Canvas maybe? Can't quite remember, but there was one that I think Glasgow said that like people tend to use, and it's a free one that you can use to do a portfolio in. But I mean, you can pretty much do it on Word too, like if you know your way around it. But yeah, so we decided to do a contents page. Basically, as it says on the tin, it just says what is on each page, very basically, and the bottom two has front lines in bold. That's the name of the actual piece that I ended up doing for that, and you'll see that at the end because the last two pages. But I will have blocked out like my name and student number. So the first two pages of the actual portfolio is a couple sketchbook pages, well, sketchbook spreads. Basically a lot of it is, the top two are basically mostly observational work, kind of experimenting with the media, doing different things and using different things. So like there was one where I used a toothpick and then a toothbrush on the other page there, and then the next page was, or the next two pages was basically working with like from photographs specifically, trying out a bunch of different things, and just kind of like, I think particularly on that one I was looking at layering with wax and doing different ink and just layering in general and just trying it out and seeing what happens sort of deal. I would say one thing about these pages, like there is like a fair amount of annotation. I feel like you don't really need as much as I put in certain areas, but like I don't know, I think for me, because I did go to college as well, like annotation is kind of fairly easy for me, but definitely when I started doing annotation it was definitely kind of harder, because you're like, oh, I have to actually say something, and sometimes it can be quite hard, but like I think once you get into the rhythm of it, it's very easy just to like, talk about what you did and all that jazz. Like, but I would definitely say like annotation's pretty good, even if they don't really necessarily read it. It's like, it's still good to talk about like what you did and all that jazz. So that's also something to think about to put in your portfolio, like if you have any annotation. Not everything has to have an annotation as well. Okay, so the next one is, at the top is a picture of a sculpture that I did. Well, not sculpture, I suppose so. It was basically a bunch of mark making on paper, and then we cut it out while observing something, and then kind of stick it all together to make a sculpture. And then obviously, as you can see on the bottom two pages underneath that, we draw it using a bunch of different techniques, and then obviously annotate it. I would definitely say on this spread there was annotation underneath on the second page at the top. That annotation was just straight up on the page, but it was very, very difficult to see. So what I ended up doing was just taking a bit of paper, just writing on top of that and just putting that down instead. So that's something also to think about when you're doing your portfolio, just like if something is actually like visible or not, because you can always just go in with a bit of paper and just rewrite it and then stick it down for the most part. Because originally I think I had it on just typed out, but I don't think that really looked quite as good as just like having it be a picture of like the page. I think kind of like separated a bit too much for me, I don't know. Okay, but yeah, basically these are another two pages. They're actually out of order. Like the bottom two pages are actually pages that would be near towards the front of the sketchbook, and then those two were kind of quite towards the end before I started doing thumbnails for the final thing. I'll go over the bottom two first. It's a bit more complicated, but it's in order in my head. At the top there's just I think it was a group of artists that did that, if I remember correctly, and it's just basically just looking at like, I think, color and using plastic, because the project was about plastics. Then the bottom bit was kind of like going into what I'd be looking at for like the rest of the project, which was kind of plastic in specifically my area, and taking pictures of that. So I had like, pictures that I had taken of plastic stuff rather than just googling it all the time. And then you'll recognize on the second page of that Flower 2, there is the sculpture again, and that was the first start of like, you know, drawing out the sculpture. So something about this as well is like it's not really in order. However, I think the way it's done is not necessarily like, it's less about having it be in order and more about having everything look good together and kind of match each other a bit more, because those kind of photos at the side kind of match a bit more into the top bit, which I think kind of does look better than having it be like, oh, there's just this random bit here. I suppose that there's a better bit to explain it. There's a better bit to actually explain it, I think, coming on later on. But I think just making it match and look together, I think, can be just as important as having it in order, if you want to have it in order. Like, at the end of the day, like, it's not an easy thing to put together a portfolio then. Anyway, so for the top two, there is a bunch of collaging being done with different materials and all that jazz, with annotations on the top and the bottom. And then on the next page, there is a couple artists. These were both animations, because originally, well, what I ended up doing was an animation for this, but we didn't put it in. What I did was I took, you know, obviously a bigger photo or screenshot of the first step of the, well, not the first step of the animation, but like a step of the animation that I felt like was more kind of showed what I was meaning, or showed what I was talking about in the annotation, or like why I was looking at, you know, this particular animation. And then I took 4 other screenshots to kind of help to show how it moved. It wasn't necessarily like a screen by screen, you know, shot, but I hope like it would kind of help to show like exactly how the animation kind of ended up going, without necessarily being like, okay, here's this one picture that's like, but then there's so much more to an animation. So I thought that was quite a good idea to do. I suppose it's not something you have to do, but like I felt like that was something that definitely helped a little bit to visually show like what was going on. Okay, so these ones were actually in the sketchbook that on the previous page you saw the two collages with the annotations on top and the bottom. This was where those ones came from, these ones came from even. And we decided to take away the annotations and stuff and just show them on their own, which I think kind of helps a little bit more. I feel like as well, because there is so much annotation in a lot of my other slides, I feel like I could get away with having less annotation on some of these other ones to kind of help show what I was doing, or the pieces themselves more like. So on the top, these were actually made for, if I remember correctly, a wheel for the animation. I might chuck up like what the wheel looked like, but I didn't put it in my portfolio. I think this and the next page have a lot of pieces that were cut up to kind of put into segments of the wheel to kind of show, like this top one would have been for like the plastics and stuff, and it would be like, oh, I found like 9 pieces of plastic on a walk, you know what I mean, like that sort of deal. And I definitely really like the top one. I really like using the plastic or the bubble wrap as kind of like a background, and the bottom one I think was going to be a background for the title, I think, of the animation. I'll find it and maybe screenshot like what I'm talking about over here as I talk about it. But yeah, I feel like these two pieces are quite good. They're both A4 for these two. On the next page I think the rest of them are like A5s, but they're still for the same project and they still kind of like have the same kind of like collage look to them. So this one was obviously 4 different things and they were kind of inspired by those things. For example, like the on the top, or the first one I suppose, is beer cans and stuff like that. So obviously, you know, I was looking at like the colours, like with white, black and red, and so I was using those colours and that sort of deal. Like, I really like these pieces. They're all A5, but this is something that I'll say as well. If you're doing a piece and you're not sure, you're like, oh, this might ruin it or whatever, one thing I'd recommend is like take a photo before you cut it up or do whatever else, because then at least you have that photo. And even if you end up going and pushing it too far, because you, at the end of the day, you can always in your annotation be like, I pushed this too far, I preferred it at this stage, you know. But it is one of those things where it's like having a photo of that stage can be quite good to actually show, because I took photos of all of these because I was like, I'm gonna cut this up and not a lot of some of this stuff is going to be shown, because as you see like on the wheel, like the beer can one and the clothes one, like they were just two, you know, 2 of each, so they were really thin compared to like the plastic one. So I felt like taking a picture at this stage was a really good idea, so then you could kind of see the entirety of like what I was going for. And I think it was definitely a good choice because I think they really added to the portfolio and helped to show like what I was doing for this project, considering we didn't end up using the actual animation for it. Okay, so next up is just some life drawing. Again, these are all from end of 2019. The top 2 are using ink, and then the bottom like 4 are just using pencil and stuff. I'll definitely say when I was there at the life drawing, I think for me I was a bit too precise with everything. Like the bottom ones were 10 minutes each, I think, maybe a bit more for some of them, but I felt like definitely I wasn't being as loose as I should have, because I feel like when I look back at the 10-minute ones that I did in college, I felt like I was getting more done. But yeah, I think these are still like really good. I think, you know, definitely they weren't the ones that I originally like sent as well, because obviously I had all the ones from 2019 when I sent off some work originally to portfolio. I don't know, I just find it interesting that like there's only really one here that I did send. But again, that's kind of partially why I went there like in the first place, was because at the end of the day, like sometimes it can be really hard to see what each piece actually symbolizes. And just as like a side note, I think that's one thing that's really hard about a portfolio, is you could look at a piece and be like, right, okay, this shows this. But at the end of the day, whether the actual person viewing it and the actual person who's grading it and, you know, marking it is going to see that is completely up in the air. Or at least for me it was completely up in the air. So yeah, it definitely really helps in terms of that. Okay, so these 2 pieces, originally what happened with these ones, it was towards the end of my course and we were putting together the portfolio. I did want some digital pieces in there. I definitely wanted some digital pieces in there. I also, as I said before, like thought it was a good opportunity to add an artist. But I didn't really know which ones to put in because I had like a good few ideas going about. I was like, I don't know which one. I'm not going to put all of them in, and I don't have enough time to like finish all of them fully. If I can find the document that I did send, I might quickly show that. But basically what I did was I did a bunch of sketches, some of them more finished than others, and I put an artist to each one and showed a picture of like the artist's work. I sent that off and said like, right, okay, so, you know, here are a bunch of the ideas, which ones should I go for? Because I don't really have a lot of time left. I would really like one in the portfolio. I feel like it's a good idea to obviously add an artist. You know, but I don't know which one to go for, because I can't have them all finished and then choose from there. So that's what I did, and we settled on these 2. I quite like these 2. Like, obviously looking at them now, I'd kind of be like, I could do more with that. I could have done this, I could have added that or whatever. But because I had, I think, like a week left, I think I spent like 3 days on one and then 4 days on another, or like, it was kind of about even on both, and then I kind of went back and forth and kind of kept editing and adding as much as I could, really. But above each one is just, I did the original drawing in pencil. Both of them are quite small, so I had to kind of like enlarge them and try and get them to the best quality that I could. For the most part, I then just took that sort of idea and then kind of evolved it and changed. I think for the majority of it, of at least the first one, I mainly just was looking at different backgrounds because I was quite happy with the position of the characters and stuff like that. For the second one, I think as well, it was mainly kind of like the positions of the backgrounds, but also like what they were wearing, you know. It wasn't necessarily like everything in the thing, because I'd already had a good idea of like what I wanted to go for in terms of what was happening, but in terms of where was kind of up in the air. And I did kind of add a little bit of annotation, but one thing that was said to me was like, don't add more, like that's enough. And I think really that kind of is like enough annotation, doesn't really need more. So you'll see at the bottom the artist names, of which like they are kind of inspired by. I quite liked these 2, to be honest. I really wanted the first one to be in, but I think the second one is kind of a good match because they are so different and they are completely different vibes, and I think that's like a good thing to show. If you do things completely differently depending on like circumstance or whatever the idea is, it might be a good idea to show that. But I would definitely say I wouldn't really have added another piece to this or anything. Like, I think just the 2 was enough, and then to work on those a bit, well, not to the full extent that I could have because of time, but you know, at the end of the day, I think they still show like a good amount of what I was talking about as well previously, where I said like, you know, if you are thinking of you know, doing a piece, like think about the situation that's happening, like what is the character interacting with its other characters, what are they doing, like that sort of thing. Because I don't know, I feel like that was something that like wasn't necessarily specifically said. I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, because I remember it was in a portfolio video and someone was showing a piece, and I remember kind of thinking like, oh, this piece is kind of like telling a story through like the person, and you know, I think they were holding like a cupcake with a candle on it. I can't remember the video. If I can find it, I will link it, but if I can't, then I'm afraid I can't. Like, it's up in the air as to whether I can find it or not. But I remember kind of thinking like, oh yeah, that's actually like showing a connection there, and like what the character's thinking, and like the what was happening around it, and also the scene in general. Like, while it wasn't like a ton, it was like, okay, well, that's like also something as well, where it's like, because there wasn't a lot happening around it, like your focus was the character and what was happening there and their expression and all that jazz. Like, but yeah, so that was those two pieces. And then there is another project. So this one was taking an object and then kind of deconstructing it and then reconstructing it in a different way. This is again not necessarily in order, but this is what I was talking about in terms of like an order, not necessarily in order, but fits a bit better together. Like, for example, the colors of the top two, god, this is gonna be hard to do now. The colors of the top left quite match the ones on the top right. There's also the greens on the top left of the right of the top left ones with the stag and stuff like that kind of match the greens and stuff of the 2 pages below it. They kind of like line up, and then you have like the dark blues and stuff like that at the bottom. They kind of match up to the top of the other side, and anyway, but if you look at it, you can kind of see what I mean, right? Where it's like putting it together, while not necessarily in order, it looks better together that kind of way. Because originally, the bottom left is the first one, and that was just experimenting with using a different artist's process. I can't remember the name of the artist, it's on there, I'm sure. But basically, we layered a bunch of watercolor, like you'd wait for it to dry, and then layer another bit of watercolor on top, and kind of like a little bit of annotation for that. And then above that is, I think, a few pages after that, where we used, originally it was graphite, but I found graphite didn't really do much. Like, it was very, very light and you couldn't really see it. So I decided to swap to charcoal, and charcoal really worked. And then the bottom two, I decided to use dye. And I was also drying it on the radiator because the radiator was going because it's winter. And I put the very bottom one on the radiator for it to dry, because it like completely slipped off and it didn't really work, and I was like, right, I need to get this dried so I can do another go. And then when I picked it up, I noticed like the radiator kind of like stained it. It was weird, so I just kept it like that, and obviously I annotated about that happening. And then on the right of that is, or the next page of that I suppose, is the stag ornament thing that I used that I smashed up, well, my dad smashed up because I couldn't get it smashed. I then with that one did like tie it to a coat hanger and like had like as a little, like, what's it called again? Aerial, is that what it's called? Where it's like a dangly thing? I think so. The next two for the sketchbook would be the bottom right. This one I think was an artist who used paper cut on the album, so it would like show through, or the album cover, so it would like show through the image on the other side of the thing, or on the next page. I don't know. Anyway, I don't know what I'm saying. And so I decided to kind of take that idea, and for this project I'd also done a bunch of pieces to the music because we were creating an album cover, and I was then kind of like, I printed off pictures of the actual, of the aerial that I made, and I then cut out all the stag bits and then kind of just put it on top and took pictures of that and then stuck those down and annotated. And that's that page. Oof, there's a lot of this. And then for the last one on the top right, the last two, on that first page I did a bunch of like pencil sketches of like what would be on the disc, what would be on the back, what would be on the front, what would be on the slipcover thing. Like, I just did a bunch of different ones of those. And then on the top right of the next page I did, so in the next page on the top of that one, that's a bunch of digital renditions of like what I'd done in the pencil sketches, which you'll see on the next slide a bit bigger to kind of show what those are about. and then on the bottom of that one was annotation of those, and then the final one that I decided to use. So the next page you can kind of see a little bit more about, you know, what was in those, I suppose those thumbnails and those digital renditions. I definitely really liked doing this. Basically what I did was I just found like on Google a image of like a CD, two kind of squares for like an album cover or whatever, and then I basically just made it in, cut those out, you know. I basically then just used the selection tool, erased it out until I got basically just something that I could then layer stuff underneath and not have to worry about like if it fit into the square or not, or have to like cut it off or whatever. And then that kind of made like a little mock-up, and you can also see like the front and the back of like the slipcover thing at the top, and one idea for the CD, and then the actual cover of the CD thing. Though to be fair, thinking and looking back at it kind of now, it's not like the actual full thing. I feel like there would have been a better way of showing it, but in terms of this I think it worked for just like showing what I was thinking on like a digital scale as well. So the next one was taking a bunch of buildings in our area and kind of just doing this. You'll see in the next page that we did a collage, and that's where a lot of this sort of jumbling and layering is kind of coming up from. But I believe the first one is actually some watercolor in the background and then pen on top, and then the next two I think are watered down bleach. I don't know if it's got watercolor, I can't remember. And then the other one is like winking bleach. Yeah, but it also has like a bit of watercolor in the background as well. I believe the final is in this, so you can kind of see what I mean in terms of watercolor in the background and all that jazz. And then the two below that are some quick inking bleach, like different experimentations, like watering down the quick ink and then like layering on bleach and then putting some ink on top of that, like just playing about with the media and like annotating it basically. Okay, so the top two are actually, you know, pages in the sketchbook. The first one on the right is just a collage of cutting out a bunch of different buildings and pictures that I took, kind of layering them on top of each other, and then taking a square window thing or a rectangle window thing, whatever you want really, putting it on top of the collage and then just like using that as like your image. And then on the right of that, those two pieces were on another sketchbook page, but we separated them out to kind of like isolate them a bit more, and those were just total studies of what was in the windows. And then what you can see at the bottom is like the final piece. Basically it's kind of the two pieces kind of extended and put together on top of each other, and the buildings, the background's done in watercolor, and then the buildings on top are done in watered down quick ink, bleach, and then, you know, some watered down quick ink and just normal quick ink on top of that to give it some more 3D look and make it look a little bit more kind of realistic, I suppose. I would definitely say for this piece, like, the original intent was to make it into like an urban scape. It doesn't necessarily look like a street. I feel like if I were to add maybe a bit more of the building coming behind the tower bit in the middle and then having like a street behind that, I think it would look a little bit more like an urban landscape, like what it was supposed to look like, or the original intent of the idea. But I think, to be honest, I think that looks like really good on its own. I think like the differing like stripe effects and all that jazz, I think it does make it look quite nice. So I know I'm not necessarily unhappy with it, you know. I quite like it, and you know, I think at the end of the day it kind of helps to show like a little bit of the process to the final piece or two. So this next one is the only piece from this project that we actually put in, and it is some wire sculptures of my face. Obviously it's not supposed to be like super hyper realistic to it. The one on the right, yeah, the first one is just one on its own, and the second one is actually again the one kind of facing the same way, but I had another smaller one that I put on top and kind of twisted down. I think they look fine. I think they add something different to the portfolio because again a lot of it has just been drawings and paintings. It's not really been too much else. There's that little sculpture at the beginning and a little bit digital work, but I feel like this is a bit more kind of 3D and a little bit more out there in terms of the media. I haven't really used wire that much unless it's to go like under something, so I've never used it for like the final thing rather than just like the lead up to a final thing sort of deal. But yeah, I quite like these pieces, although the only thing I'd say is maybe I would have tried a bit more to kind of photograph them and see what would have looked a bit better, because I do wonder if I'd photographed this maybe on black paper, maybe it might have had it show up a little bit better. I'm not entirely sure, But I would definitely say if you're photographing something similar to this and you're, you know, it might be an idea to kind of like photograph it on like different colors and see what happens and see how, if it looks better. Because I, like, thinking on it, I'm a bit like, oh, maybe I should try to do black paper, because it might have taken away that kind of shadow that's in the background a bit and would have hopefully helped to make the actual piece stand out. But other than that, like, I quite like these photos just in general. I think they're the best ones I got. Okay, so this one's set up a little bit differently. So this was a project I did before Portfolio. This was in, I don't know, like March, I think? No, April. Okay, yeah. No, it would have been April actually, yeah. So this project is kind of about like working in a supermarket during the beginning of the pandemic, and sort of, in particular, a lot of the buying up of certain products going on, in particular bread and toilet roll for some fucking reason. And basically the influence behind this one in terms of the artist influence was Banksy and sort of the satirical humor of him. And I would definitely say that in some pieces the satirical humor is there, and then others it isn't. I feel like in particular the second piece with the red and orange kind of stripe background, I feel like is definitely more of a satirical take in terms of more akin to his work than what the final ended up being, but you know, it was still the artist's influence. And these were the two photos I used. It was actually an A3 sketchbook, and I had a good few pages more than this, but I wasn't really sure of, like, if I were to done this on my own, I probably would have just put, you know, the 4 sketchbook things that I had in there. And I guess one of those things where it's like, I'm not sure whether that would have helped it or not, really. So I was glad to have help at that point, definitely, to kind of help choose the bits that were actually important rather than just kind of chuck everything on the page. So the top 2 are A5s, same with the next one on the bottom left. And the one on the bottom right is actually one of the A3 pages, because I tried to go for like a kind of collaging sort of idea with this sketchbook. I definitely could have like separated them out a bit more and kind of put the annotations a little bit more in different places rather than just kind of all down the middle and a bit at the side. I think if I were to do this on my own, I don't know if I would have put in that bottom left one, just mainly because it was like a really quick sketch and it was just like, you know, quick. But I suppose the thing about it is like it does kind of match the satirical humor of Banksy, and like the artist's influence actually kind of matches that a little bit more as well, so I can see why it was kind of implemented. Okay, so this is the final piece. It was done with gouache. I've heard it say gouache, but when I've heard it's gouache, I don't know. I used that one. I would definitely say I'm not the best with gouache. I've kind of learned how to use acrylic, and I quite like using acrylic. There was another piece that I did do acrylic. It was an A1, and actually I'll probably show it. It is also on my social media. I think I mentioned it at the beginning. I don't know if I showed it then, but I'll show it now. But like, I feel like I've kind of gotten quite proficient in doing acrylic just over time as I've used it. I think I have used oils before. They're not the best oils, but like, I don't know, there's something about them that just, when I try and like paint over them to help kind of blend stuff in and add more paint, I feel like it just kind of ends up with this weird streaky effect. I don't know. It's just, and it's not like something where it's like I can just go in and kind of mend that. It just keeps doing it. I don't know. That's been my experience in terms of like oils and stuff, because there's no oils in this. I do kind of like that I had like a bigger piece that wasn't just done in acrylics. I mean, to be fair, like, I don't think is there a piece in this? I don't think there really is a piece in this that is just purely done in acrylics, but I suppose this one could have been acrylic and it probably would have been fine, to be honest. But yeah, I really like this piece. I like how it's the final piece and it's on its own. I think it really helps in terms of showing also kind of technical skill, but also like my own idea and stuff like that. Like, to be honest, considering when it was done, it was still like quite early on in the pandemic, and I feel like you wouldn't have seen this everywhere at this point. So to be honest, I haven't really seen anything like this at all since then, so I don't really know. But yeah, I definitely think like this ended on a strong note. Yeah, but that's something I see echoed a lot, is sort of like the start off strong, end strong sort of deal. How effective that is, I'm not sure. I do kind of wonder if that is like a really effective strategy, or if it is something that isn't really that effective. I feel like this did start off fairly strong, but I think it ended, I think, with the better piece that I had. But yeah, that was my portfolio. I had a lot more stuff than this. Like, obviously, when it comes to the sketchbooks and stuff like that, like, you do so much and then just not a lot gets used, and it can be frustrating. I mean, I think that definitely ended up affecting me, particularly at the beginning half of 2020, because with these, well, at least the piece that I showed with the tarot kind of idea, which was acrylic, and this piece as well, they were kind of influenced by that a bit, because I did an A3 sketchbook for them, but I also only did, I think, 6 pages for this one, and then I did, I think, 8 pages of A3 for the tarot one. And I feel like that was kind of because, like, there'd be so much, if I did more than that, I kind of felt like, oh, I'd be doing so much, but then, like, hardly any of it was used, whereas I can kind of show everything and all that jazz. But I think that's something that's, like, hard as well, where it's like you kind of need to show enough but not show too much or show too little. Yeah, it's not easy. It's really not easy, or at least for me, it's really not easy. But anyway, yeah, that's the end of my portfolio. Again, I don't really have a ton of advice, and you know, to be honest, it is one of those things where it's like I did say, like, I didn't really have a lot of advice. Something I would say as well is, like, even with feedback, particularly from Djcad, which is just like a grid, it can be very, very hard to get an idea or a sense of, like, where you're actually going wrong. So it's not easy to really know where to go sometimes, and you know, I definitely say for me, in my situation, all that jazz, portfolio definitely really helped. Like, I would have not gone in, I don't think, if I had not have had, you know, the help of Julie and all that jazz. So yeah, that was it. I have a bunch more videos that I've already kind of half filmed and all that jazz. I need to just do a bunch of editing. I'm aiming for once a week. Whether that's actually going to happen, I don't know yet. Hopefully it will. So like and subscribe. It's weird saying that. But yeah, like and subscribe if you want to see more. I suppose I could do, like, looking through sketchbooks and stuff like that, but I think one of the bigger problems is just, like, I feel like because I'm a pretty rambly person, I probably end up spending hours and hours doing it, and I would debate maybe streaming it instead rather than, you know, just doing it as a video. So I suppose I'll see you guys in the next video if you want to see what else I do. But yeah, I'll see you later.